Welcome to the quiet world of a lonely Atlantic island in the year 1638. Settle in now, my friend. Find that cozy spot. Sink a little deeper into your chair. Let your shoulders soften and your breathing slow down. We're going to take a gentle drift back in time together. Tell me, where have you found yourself tonight? Is it a quiet room, or perhaps the hum of distant activity surrounds you? And what time is it where you are? Evening, I imagine, or maybe a peaceful morning in your own perfectly chaotic schedule. If you find these quiet journeys soothing, remember to subscribe so you never miss a moment of our travels. Now close your eyes and imagine the salt spray on your face, the rough stone beneath your worn boots. You are the new keeper of this remote lighthouse, and the vast Atlantic Ocean stretches before you, a restless companion. The year is 1638, and the rhythm of your life is dictated by the ebb and flow of the tide, the lonely cry of gulls, and the steady, vital pulse of the lamp you must keep burning bright. The biting wind, a sharp contrast to the warmth you recall, whips across your face as you blink awake on a rough, sea-worn dock. A man, his skin weathered like old leather and his voice raspy from countless sea voyages, offers a curt nod, his gaze fixed on a small boat already laden with his belongings. He gestures with a calloused hand towards a stone tower that rises starkly from the rocky outcrop surrounding you. Your lighthouse, mine's done, he states plainly, his pack already slung over his shoulder, indicating his immediate departure. The island itself seems to stretch out in shades of gray, punctuated by stubborn tufts of hardy grass, all under the ceaseless roar of the Atlantic. The outgoing keeper, clearly eager to be gone, presses a small leather-bound book into your hand. The log, he explains, his tone clipped, and a list of what's meant to be here. Check it. He offers no further words of guidance or comfort, his attention already drawn back to the bobbing boat. The tide is beginning to creep higher on the dock, making your meager pile of personal items appear precariously close to the water's edge. This brief window of opportunity is shrinking with each passing moment, a silent countdown to your absolute solitude. A profound sense of isolation washes over you as the keeper's boat shrinks to a distant speck on the vast gray sea. You are now truly alone on this wind-swept rock, the ceaseless roar of the waves the only sound to break the heavy silence. The damp, cool air within the stone lighthouse, when you finally step inside, offers little comfort, carrying the faint, lingering scent of lamp oil and salt. The outgoing keeper left behind a set of rough-hewn instructions for tending the lamp, a task that feels both vital and overwhelmingly unfamiliar. Your hands, still feeling the chill from the dock, move with deliberate care as you clean the large glass lens, its smooth, cool surface a welcome sensation. You then turn your attention to the lamp itself, meticulously trimming the wick of the whale oil lamp, a task that requires a steady hand and focused effort. The rich, slightly acrid smell of the oil fills your nostrils as you carefully pour it into the reservoir, each drop a precious commodity. The grinding sound of the mechanism that will soon rotate the lens is loud in the enclosed space, but the focused effort of tending the lamp pushes other sensations into the background, demanding your complete attention. You steady yourself against the rough texture of the stone walls, feeling their solid, unyielding nature. Later, as you survey the exterior of the lighthouse, your gaze falls upon a section of the stone seawall. Waves crash against it with relentless force, and you notice a small breach, a crack that seems to widen with each powerful surge. The outgoing keeper had mentioned it, shrugging it off with a dismissive gesture, but its presence gnaws at you. Addressing this now would consume precious time and energy, potentially delaying the critical task of preparing the lamp for the night's watch. It's a task that demands all your focus, and this new problem feels like a test of your ability to prioritize. You find yourself torn between the urgent need to shore up the seawall against the relentless sea, fearing a larger collapse that could undermine the very foundation of your refuge, or conserving your dwindling energy for the demanding, all-consuming task of keeping the lamp burning through the long night. The sea spray coats your face, a constant reminder of the ocean's power, and you weigh the immediate threat of water against the nightly obligation of light. A small stunted tree nearby, bent and twisted by the constant winds, seems to understand your predicament, offering no easy answers. The initial provisions you brought, though carefully rationed, are dwindling faster than anticipated, a stark reality of your isolated existence. You must venture out from the tower to find more sustainable sources of food and fresh water if you are to endure. The island itself offers meager sustenance, sparsely covered with tough, salt-tolerant plants, their leaves coated in a fine layer of sea salt. You discover a small patch of edible greens, their taste slightly bitter but filling, and then, with immense relief, a seep of fresh water trickling from a fissure in the rock, a welcome respite from the salty air. The sharp cries of seabirds echo around you as you explore, their calls a constant, almost melancholic soundtrack to your efforts. You lean against the rough bark of a stunted, wind-battered tree, catching your breath, the texture familiar and grounding. The cool, damp earth under your worn boots feels different from the dry, ancient stone of the lighthouse, a small but significant variation in your surroundings. It's a different kind of texture, one that speaks of life persisting against the odds, much like you must. A particularly strong gust of wind rattles the lighthouse tower today, more forceful than any you have experienced before, making the very stones seem to groan. The oil for the lamp, meticulously measured, is noticeably lower than you expected, a stark reminder of your absolute reliance on the dwindling supplies delivered by the outgoing keeper. The urgency of keeping the light burning, a beacon of safety for any unseen ships, is paramount. But so is your own survival, which depends on conserving your own limited resources. This constant balancing act feels like walking a tightrope over the vast ocean. You must decide which crucial resource to reduce, a choice that feels weighted with consequences. Do you lower the amount of oil used for the lamp, risking a dimmer or shorter burning light that might fail to be seen? Or do you cut back on your own meager provisions, enduring greater hunger in the hope that the light will burn brighter and longer? The thought of a ship missing your guidance because your flame sputtered out is a chilling one, as is the prospect of your own stomach gnawing with hunger, weakening you for the essential tasks ahead. It feels like a choice between your duty and your own immediate well-being. The vastness of the ocean serves as a constant, silent companion, stretching out in every direction with an almost overwhelming emptiness. You spend hours scanning the horizon, noting the infrequent passage of ships, distant smudges against the blue. Today, a small sailing vessel, its sails catching the breeze, passes at a considerable distance. You can make out figures on its deck, tiny specks of humanity, but they appear to pay no heed to your lonely tower, their own journey the sole focus of their attention. The profound silence that follows their passing seems to press in on you, amplifying your isolation. A deep sense of quiet contemplation settles upon you as you find yourself tracing patterns in the condensation that forms on the lighthouse's thick glass, a silent conversation with the empty sea. The distant shapes of clouds, shifting and changing form against the sky, offer a fleeting distraction from the ceaseless, rhythmic pulse of the waves against the rocks below. These moments of quiet observation are precious, a small comfort against the sheer scale of the sea and the smallness of your own existence within it. A fierce storm has passed, leaving the island battered and strewn with the wreckage of the sea's fury. Amongst the tangled driftwood and debris washed ashore, you discover the shattered remains of a small boat, its hull splintered, but possibly salvageable. Repairing it would be a significant undertaking, demanding valuable time and materials that you can ill afford to spare. Yet it represents a slim, tantalizing hope of reaching the mainland for much-needed supplies. Alternatively, you could carefully break down the wreckage, salvaging planks and ropes that could be used to strengthen your own isolated existence on the island. You find yourself weighing the risky gamble of attempting to repair the boat for a potential journey against the more immediate practical benefit of using its materials to fortify your own refuge. The wind still whispers through the shattered wood, carrying with it the salt spray and the scent of the sea, a constant reminder of the world beyond this isolated rock. The thought of seeing the mainland again, of human voices other than your own echoing thoughts, is a powerful pull. But the practical demands of survival here and now are equally strong. The routine of tending the lighthouse has become deeply ingrained, a rhythm that dictates your days and nights. You've learned to read the subtle signs of the weather, the shifting patterns of the waves, and the changing colors of the sea. The cleaning of the lens is a ritual, performed with a precision that ensures the light pierces the darkness with unwavering clarity, a testament to your dedication. While cleaning the lamp housing, you discover a hidden compartment, revealing a small collection of books, a surprising find that offers a quiet connection to a world of knowledge and stories beyond your immediate reality. The warm glow of the lamp on your face as you tend to it is a comforting presence, a small sun in the vast darkness. You feel the polished smoothness of the worn book pages as you carefully turn them, a different texture entirely from the rough stone and sea-bleached wood that make up your usual world. The faint smell of dried ink, a scent from a distant time and place, mingles with the familiar aroma of lamp oil, creating a unique olfactory signature for your solitary life. It's a quiet comfort to have these companions in your solitude. A rough sea churns relentlessly, and through the blinding spray, you spot a figure clinging precariously to a piece of wreckage tossed about by the powerful waves. It is a survivor from a ship that foundered in the recent storm, weak, battered, and clearly desperate. Your own supplies are meager, and the effort of caring for another person, even briefly, could jeopardize your ability to maintain the lighthouse and your own precarious sustenance. This discovery presents a profound moral dilemma, forcing you to confront the limits of your capacity and your compassion. A deep conflict stirs within you as you consider the best course of action. Do you offer what little aid you can, sharing your precious resources and risking your own survival in the process? Or do you prioritize your duty to the lighthouse and your own life, leaving the survivor to their fate? The thought of their suffering is a heavy one, but the potential consequences for your own survival are equally stark. The wind seems to howl louder, as if in anticipation of your decision, and the waves crash against the shore with renewed ferocity. The decision weighs heavily on your soul. The survivor, a young man named Thomas, slowly recovers from his ordeal, his gratitude a palpable presence in the small space of the lighthouse. However, your food stores are now critically low, and the oil for the lamp burns with a dimmer, less certain light, a direct consequence of your act of compassion. Thomas, though helpful with simple chores, adds to the demand for your already scarce resources. You must now find a way to supplement your food and conserve the remaining oil even more carefully, navigating the delicate balance between your commitments and your own needs. The quiet loneliness you experienced before has been replaced by a different kind of pressure, a shared struggle for survival. Alternatively, if you chose not to help the survivor in Chapter 9, the empty, expansive sea where they clung to wreckage now offers only a stark reminder of your decision. The survivor is gone, leaving behind a profound silence that descends upon the island, heavier than before. You grapple with the weight of your choice, the isolation now feeling sharper, tinged with a new kind of loneliness that settles deep within your heart. The ceaseless rhythm of the waves seems to murmur accusations, and the lamp's steady glow, while dutiful, feels colder in the wake of your inaction. A ship appears on the horizon, larger and more imposing than any you have seen before. Its sails a deep dark hue, and its approach steady, heading in your general direction. You are unsure of its intentions or its purpose, and the uncertainty breeds a sense of caution. Signaling for help might attract much-needed supplies and perhaps news from the mainland, but it could also reveal your solitary vulnerability to potentially hostile intentions, drawing unwanted attention to your isolated post. Maintaining a low profile might protect you, preserving your solitude, but it risks a missed opportunity for vital assistance. You find yourself contemplating the risk of signaling the ship, a potential beacon of hope or a harbinger of danger, or remaining unseen, preserving your isolation and safety, but foregoing any chance of interaction or aid. The vast, unblinking eye of the sea seems to watch your deliberation, and the wind carries the faint scent of distant lands, a whisper of the world beyond your lonely tower. The decision feels monumental, shaping the future of your existence on this remote outpost. The ship, a merchant vessel named the Sea Serpent, stops offshore, its imposing size dwarfing the waves. Its captain, a gruff but fair man with a weathered face and keen eyes, hails you from the deck. He offers a small exchange of goods for information about safe passage and any recent hazards encountered. You receive some much-needed provisions, hardtack, salted pork, and a small cask of lamp oil, and a few spare wicks, a welcome relief. The interaction, though brief, is a reminder of the outside world and its practical demands. Alternatively, if you remained unseen, the ship passes without incident, leaving you with your dwindling supplies and a gnawing sense of what might have been, a missed opportunity that hangs in the air. The storm that had been gathering on the horizon now begins to lash the island with renewed ferocity, the wind howling and the waves building, testing the resilience of your lighthouse and your resolve. The isolation feels deeper, amplified by the knowledge that contact was within reach but not made. A vicious storm descends upon the island, the lighthouse groaning and shuddering under the assault of wind and wave. The lamp, your sole responsibility, falters precariously as the wind buffets the tower with relentless force. The effort to keep the lens clear and the flame steady is immense, requiring you to venture into dangerous sections of the tower, exposed to the raw power of the elements. Your own safety is in jeopardy with each attempt to secure the light against the tempest's fury. You are torn between seeking the relative safety of the lower levels, conserving your own strength against the storm's fury, and pushing yourself to the absolute limit to ensure the lighthouse beam remains a constant guide for any vessels bravely braving the tempest. The roaring of the wind and the crashing of the waves are deafening, and the very stones of the tower seem to vibrate with the intensity of the storm, demanding your full, unyielding commitment. The storm has finally passed, leaving the island scoured clean but standing, a testament to its resilience. The lamp, thanks to your tireless efforts, still burns, a steady, unwavering presence in the clearing dawn. You stand on the parapet, the rising sun casting a warm glow across the vast expanse of the ocean, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The initial fear and disorientation you felt upon arrival have been replaced by a quiet, enduring resilience, a deep understanding of the island's rhythms and the demands of your duty. The profound, solitary peace that comes with it has settled into your being. The island is no longer a prison, but a part of you, your home. You collect rainwater in a smooth, gray stone basin, the water tasting pure and clean, a simple luxury. The cry of a distant seagull is now a familiar, almost comforting sound. The departing keeper's boat, a small, sturdy vessel bobbing against the rough-hewn dock, already held his meager possessions. He offered no lingering glance as he stepped aboard, his movements efficient, eager to leave this exposed rock. You had chosen to ask about the lamp's mechanism, a decision that occupied your thoughts as the small boat pulled away, leaving you in the company of the wind and the ceaseless roar of the Atlantic. The salty spray stung your face, a sharp reminder of your sudden, profound solitude. You turned your gaze, finally, to the stone tower that rose before you, a stark monument against the gray sky. It was now yours, its secrets and its responsibilities yours alone to uncover. Following that urgent departure, you stepped across the threshold of the lighthouse, the air inside cooler, carrying the damp scent of stone and disuse. The outgoing keeper had indeed left a small leather-bound book, its pages filled with his spidery script, detailing the lamp's care. You found yourself meticulously cleaning the large glass lens, its smooth, cool surface a welcome texture against your chapped hands. This task, requiring concentration and a gentle touch, pushed the lingering unease aside. You then turned your attention to trimming the wick of the oil lamp, a task demanding precision as you worked to ensure a steady flame. The rich, slightly biting smell of whale oil filled your nostrils as you carefully poured it into the reservoir, a crucial fuel for the long nights ahead. The grinding sound of the lamp's rotating mechanism was loud within the confined space, a constant mechanical heartbeat that seemed to amplify your isolation. Yet the focused effort of tending the flame, of ensuring its brightness, held your attention. You steadied yourself against the rough texture of the stone walls, the imperfections of the ancient masonry grounding you in the present. Later, as dusk began to gather outside, you broke open a stale biscuit, its bland taste a stark contrast to the vividness of your surroundings. But it served its purpose, filling the hollow ache in your stomach. This simple act of sustenance felt like a small victory in the face of overwhelming newness. The memory of your decision to question the departing keeper surfaced as you continued your work. While the information he'd given was brief, it had been enough to understand the basic operation of the lamp, a crucial piece of knowledge that now felt like a lifeline. Had you instead gathered your own few belongings, you might have secured them more tightly, but the risk of losing the keeper's hasty yet vital instructions seemed far greater. Those instructions, scribbled in the log, had already proven their worth in these initial moments, guiding your hands and your efforts. The lack of haste on your part in that moment meant you were better prepared now for the immediate tasks before you. As you prepared to secure the lamp for its first full night of duty, your eyes scanned the interior of the tower. The outgoing keeper had left the place functional, yet a sense of unease settled upon you as you noticed how quickly the initial store of oil seemed to be diminishing. This was more than just a concern for your own comfort. The lamp was the reason you were here, a vital beacon for any vessel that might venture near these treacherous waters. The stark reality of your dependence on these dwindling supplies pressed upon you, demanding a careful accounting of every drop. The vastness of the ocean lay outside, an endless expanse of gray under a sky that promised a long night. Hours would pass before the lamp's steady beam was truly needed, and during that time, your mind would inevitably wander. You found yourself tracing the patterns of condensation that formed on the cool glass of the lantern room, a silent conversation with the empty sea. The distant shapes of clouds, moving with a silent, inexorable grace, offered a fleeting distraction from the ceaseless, rhythmic roar of the waves against the island's base. These quiet moments, however, were punctuated by the constant awareness of your solitary duty. The task of maintaining the lamp became a ritual, an ingrained practice that offered a semblance of order to your new existence. You learned to read the subtle signs of the changing weather in the shifting patterns of the waves and the behavior of the seabirds that circled overhead. Cleaning the large glass lens was a particular kind of devotion, ensuring that the light would pierce the encroaching darkness with unwavering clarity. It was during one of these cleaning sessions that you discovered a small, hidden compartment within the tower's stone structure, revealing a collection of books. Their presence offered a tangible connection to a world beyond your immediate reality, a silent promise of knowledge and escape. The polished smoothness of the worn book pages offered a texture entirely different from the rough stone and the sea-bleached wood that comprised your world. As you carefully turned them, the faint smell of dried ink mingled with the ever-present scent of lamp oil, creating a unique, personal aroma for this isolated space. The knowledge contained within these volumes, though written by hands long gone, felt immediate and relevant, a testament to human curiosity and endurance. It was a discovery that promised to fill the quiet hours, offering a different kind of sustenance, one for the mind rather than the body. This newfound source of mental engagement came at a crucial time, for the practical reality of your situation remained. The lamp required constant vigilance, and the oil was a finite resource. You understood that any decision made now regarding its use would have far-reaching consequences. The question of how best to conserve this precious fuel while still ensuring the light remained a powerful beacon was one that occupied your thoughts. It was a balance you were still learning to strike, a constant negotiation between necessity and the fundamental purpose of your isolated vigil. As you tended to the lamp, its warm glow cast a comforting light upon your face, a steady, reliable presence in the deepening gloom. This methodical work provided a grounding effect, a sense of purpose that helped to push aside the vastness of the ocean and the weight of your isolation. The rhythm of your tasks, from cleaning the lens to checking the oil level, became a familiar and reassuring pattern. It was a routine born of necessity, yet it also fostered a growing sense of competence and self-reliance, skills that were proving invaluable in this unforgiving environment. The stark reality of your limited provisions continued to press upon you. You knew that sustenance was as vital as the lamp's flame, and the need to explore the island for further resources was becoming increasingly urgent. The thought of venturing out, of scanning the sparse landscape for anything edible, was a necessary step in your journey towards self-sufficiency. The wind, carrying the sharp cries of seabirds, seemed to urge you forward, a constant reminder of the natural world that surrounded and sustained you. Each day presented a new challenge, a new opportunity to learn and adapt. You find yourself changed by what you've encountered, more attuned to the rhythm of the sea and the stark beauty of your island home. The practical skills you've honed now feeling like an extension of yourself. The biting wind whipped your hair across your face as you surveyed the rough stone of the lighthouse space. The outgoing keeper's words, "Check it," echoed in your mind, referring to the logbook he'd thrust into your hands. You'd managed to secure your own belongings, the rough wool of your coat, and the few personal items you'd brought, bundling them tightly before the boat had pulled away. That small, decisive act, grabbing your possessions instead of questioning him further, now felt like the first firm step you'd taken on this isolated rock. The sheer silence that descended after the boat's engine faded was profound, broken only by the relentless roar of the Atlantic. You ran a hand over the cold, salt-crusted stone of the seawall, feeling the grit and imagining the immense force of the waves that slammed against it daily. A small breach, no larger than your fist, caught your eye, a dark gash in the otherwise solid construction. The outgoing keeper had dismissed it with a wave of his hand, clearly uninterested in anything beyond his own departure. Now, as you considered the sheer power of the ocean, a deep unease settled within you. Leaving it unattended felt like ignoring a ticking clock, a threat that could worsen with each passing tide. This island, so stark and exposed, demanded constant vigilance, not just for the lamp, but for the very structure that housed it. A significant portion of your remaining energy felt earmarked for the night's watch, a task that already loomed large. The instructions for tending the lamp, which you'd carefully studied inside the damp, cool tower, demanded precision. Trimming the wick, filling the reservoir with whale oil, and ensuring the rotating mechanism was ready for its ceaseless duty occupied your thoughts. The faint, lingering smell of whale oil, a rich and slightly sharp scent, was already becoming familiar. To divert your attention now to a structural repair, however necessary it seemed, felt like a gamble against the immediate need for a guiding light. You found yourself torn between two pressing needs. The ingrained sense of duty, honed by years of following instructions, urged you to address the seawall breach. The potential for it to widen, to compromise the tower's foundation, was a chilling thought, especially with winter storms likely still to come. Yet the prospect of another sleepless night, meticulously ensuring the lamp's flame remained bright and unwavering, also weighed heavily. Conserving your strength for that critical task, for the solitary vigil against the encroaching darkness, felt equally, if not more, important. The outgoing keeper had left you with little room for error, and the consequences of either choice felt equally stark. As you paced the narrow strip of ground between the tower and the churning sea, your gaze drifted to the sky. The gulls circled overhead, their sharp cries a lonely song against the ocean's constant roar. This island was a world unto itself, demanding a self-reliance you were only beginning to comprehend. The bitter taste of the stale biscuit you'd eaten earlier lingered, a reminder of the sparse provisions. Your exploration for fresh water, a seep of cool, clear liquid discovered near a patch of tough edible greens, had been a small victory, but it only highlighted the larger challenge of sustenance. The rough bark of a stunted, wind-blasted tree offered a moment's pause, its texture a welcome contrast to the smooth, worn stones underfoot. The sheer scale of the task ahead began to sink in. The outgoing keeper had provided a basic handover, but the subtleties of maintaining this vital structure, exposed to the full fury of the Atlantic, were lessons learned only through experience. You'd read in the logbook of previous keepers, brief entries detailing storms weathered and ships guided, their words offering a thread of connection across time. One entry, detailing a particular method for polishing the large glass lens using finely ground oyster shells, struck you as particularly peculiar. The idea of polishing glass with shells, a technique likely developed out of necessity and a surprising amount of ingenuity, brought a faint, wry smile to your lips. It was a glimpse into the unique challenges and surprising solutions of life on these remote outposts. The debate continued within you, a quiet tug of war between immediate protection and long-term security. To spend hours meticulously packing stones and mortar into the breach might leave you too exhausted to properly manage the lamp. The thought of the light faltering, even for a moment, was a prospect that sent a shiver down your spine. On the other hand, to ignore the damage, to see the waves gnawing at the very foundation of your existence, felt like a betrayal of the responsibility entrusted to you. The outgoing keeper might have shirked this duty, but you were determined to be more thorough, more mindful of the enduring nature of your role. You chose to focus on the immediate needs of the lamp, a decision born from the stark reality of your isolation. The thought of a ship in distress, its sailors relying on your steady beam, was a powerful motivator. You gathered the oil, the lamp wick, and the polishing cloths, moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The routine, though demanding, offered a structure, a predictable rhythm in the unpredictable environment. The cool, smooth surface of the glass lens felt reassuring under your touch as you began the meticulous cleaning process, each stroke a small act of defiance against the encroaching darkness and the vast, indifferent sea. This careful attention to the lamp has become part of your own story. The dwindling supply of biscuits, once a minor annoyance, now presses on your mind with growing urgency. The outgoing keeper's hasty departure, a blur of shouted instructions and the receding line of his boat against the vast gray sea, left you with only a carefully checked inventory and the daunting task of the lighthouse. Those initial days were a whirlwind of establishing the lamp's rhythm, a steady, demanding pulse against the island's wild heart. Your decision in Chapter 3 to focus on the lamp's immediate needs rather than the slowly crumbling seawall has bought you time for the light, but the memory of that small breach where waves still gnawed at the stones lingers like a damp chill. Now, the emptiness of the supply chest echoes the emptiness of the horizon, a constant reminder that your lifeline to the mainland is a fragile thread easily broken. To counter this growing unease, a deeper exploration of the island itself becomes not just a curiosity, but a necessity. The sturdy tower, your only shelter, offers little in the way of sustenance beyond its own stark walls. You must venture beyond its shadow, into the wind-scoured landscape, to uncover what this isolated rock might offer. The sparse growth clinging to the stony ground, tough and resilient, hints at a hidden bounty. You recall the outgoing keeper mentioning certain plants, his words brief and almost dismissive, as if they held no real importance to him, but to you, they are potential lifelines. The wind, a constant presence, whips across the exposed ground, carrying the sharp cries of seabirds that wheel and dip in the endless sky. Each gust tugs at your worn clothing, a rough caress against your skin as you scan the terrain. Your boots, thankfully sturdy, crunch on loose scree and the occasional patch of coarse, salt-tolerant grass, a sound that feels loud in the otherwise sweeping roar of the ocean. The sheer expanse of the Atlantic, a restless, shifting entity, stretches out in every direction, a powerful force that shapes both the land and your existence here. Following a faint, almost imperceptible track worn into the earth, you discover a cluster of hardy green plants. Their leaves are a deep, rich green, slightly thick and leathery, a testament to their ability to withstand the salty air and relentless winds. Hesitantly, you pluck a few, their stems surprisingly firm beneath your fingers. There is a subtle earthy scent, not unpleasant, but alien to the familiar smells of the mainland, a fragrance of survival and tenacity. Bringing these leaves to your lips, you find their taste is distinctly bitter, a sharp tang that makes your mouth water, but there is a sustaining quality to it, a promise of nourishment. This new flavor, so different from the blandness of your stored biscuits, fills you with a flicker of hope. It is a small victory, but on this island, such small victories are the very fabric of existence, the markers that allow you to press on, to continue your vigil. Further inland, where the ground dips slightly and shelters from the harshest winds, you notice a dampness that seems out of place on this otherwise dry rock. Following this hint of moisture, you discover a small seep, a place where fresh water trickles from a crevice in the stone. The water is cool and clear, tasting pure and clean, a stark contrast to the brackish taste of the seawater that surrounds you. This discovery is a profound relief, alleviating a gnawing worry about your water supply. Leaning against the rough bark of a stunted tree, its branches twisted and gnarled by the constant assault of the elements, you take a moment to rest. The texture of the wood is coarse and unforgiving, a familiar feeling now, much like the stone of the tower itself. The effort of exploration, of searching for these vital resources, leaves you with a pleasant weariness, a sense of purpose that pushes aside the lingering anxieties. Each new discovery is a small act of defiance against the island's isolation. As you gather more of the bitter greens and fill a makeshift container with the precious water, a realization dawns. These resources, while vital, are only a temporary reprieve. The outgoing keeper's log, though brief, mentioned a system of rationing, a careful husbanding of supplies that you are only beginning to truly understand. The initial generosity of the provided stores is designed to be stretched, not consumed with haste, a lesson you are learning through direct necessity. The stark reality of your situation solidifies. Maintaining the lighthouse is a continuous drain on resources, from the whale oil that fuels the lamp to the very wick that carries its flame. The island provides, yes, but it demands a careful, measured approach, a constant awareness of what is available and what is needed. It is a delicate balance, and any misstep could have dire consequences, not just for your comfort, but for your very survival and the safety of any ships that rely on your light. The need to supplement your diet, to find more consistent sources of food than sporadic foraging, becomes paramount. The outgoing keeper's mention of edible plants was a starting point, but this island likely holds more secrets, more ways to sustain a solitary existence. You consider methods of preserving the bounty you find, perhaps drying the greens or finding ways to store the water more effectively, tasks that require ingenuity and resourcefulness. The wind continues its mournful song, a sound that has become a familiar companion, a constant reminder of the vastness surrounding this small speck of land. It carries with it the faint, sharp cries of seabirds, their calls echoing across the water, a lonely chorus that never truly fades. You feel the dampness seeping into your boots from the ground, a cool sensation that grounds you in the present moment, making the harsh realities of your situation palpable. You wonder how others have managed this solitary duty through the years. Did they find their own ways to connect with this rugged landscape, to draw sustenance and solace from its harsh beauty. The routine of tending the lamp, while essential, offers little in the way of deep human connection, and the island's resources, though present, require a constant, vigilant effort to be utilized. This constant need to provide for yourself, to constantly seek and manage, is a different kind of burden than the straightforward task of lighting the lamp. As you turn back towards the tower, your small collection of greens secured, the weight of the sea's immensity seems to press in. The journey has offered a temporary respite from the gnawing worry of provisions, but it has also deepened your understanding of the island's unforgiving nature. You have touched something larger than yourself, a primal struggle for sustenance against the vast, indifferent ocean. A sharp gust of wind whips across the outcrop, snatching at the rough-spun fabric of your tunic. It rattles the tower's stone walls with a force that seems to echo the very restlessness you feel within. The oil for the lamp, once a comforting, ample supply, now appears critically low. You estimate it might not last through another week of continuous burning, a thought that settles like a cold stone in your gut. This realization presses upon you the stark truth of your isolation. The steady glow of the lantern is your only purpose, and its flame is tethered to finite resources. The urgency of keeping that light alive clashes with the primal need for self-preservation, forcing a difficult reckoning with your remaining stores. You find yourself torn between two stark choices, each with its own potential for disaster. To reduce the amount of oil burned each night means risking a dimmer, less effective beam, a light that might fail to guide a struggling ship, or worse, lead it astray. A dimmer light could be the difference between safety and a watery grave for unknown souls. Yet, cutting back on your own meager rations, the dry biscuits and hearty roots you've managed to gather, means facing the gnawing pang of hunger more acutely, weakening your own ability to perform the demanding tasks of the lighthouse. Your body already protests the limited diet, and the thought of further deprivation chills you more than the ever-present sea spray. This decision, weighing the lives of distant strangers against your own immediate survival, feels like a burden heavier than any stone in the tower. You trace the condensation forming on the inside of the lantern room's thick glass, your fingertip leaving a temporary clear path through the mist. Remembering the words of the outgoing keeper, a man whose haste to leave spoke volumes, you recall no specific advice on rationing. His only concern seemed to be reaching the mainland. This absence of guidance amplifies the solitude, leaving you to navigate these critical choices entirely alone. Looking out, you spot a small patch of sea-worn driftwood, a reminder of the storms that have swept this rock. Amongst it, you notice a few hardy seabirds, their sharp cries a constant soundtrack to your days. These birds, you've observed, seem to thrive on the limited life the island offers, their resilience a quiet lesson. They know how to find nourishment in what little the ocean provides, a skill you are still desperately trying to master. Your previous decision in Chapter 3 to prioritize the lamp's immediate needs over shoring up the weakened seawall now feels like a gamble that might leave the entire structure vulnerable in a truly catastrophic storm. But for now, the immediate concern is the flame itself. The urgency of the dwindling oil gnaws at you. You consider the whale oil, its rich, slightly acrid scent, now a familiar part of your world. The outgoing keeper had left a modest supply, but even that was not as plentiful as you had initially hoped. Every drop burned is a step closer to darkness, a tangible measure of your isolation's increasing peril. This careful, measured consumption is a skill you've had to learn quickly, a constant balancing act between duty and existence. You consider your own meager food stores, the dried fish and tough roots you've managed to forage. They offer sustenance, but little comfort, and the thought of enduring more hunger makes your stomach clench. Yet, the lamp represents a promise, a steadfast beacon against the unforgiving Atlantic. To diminish its power feels like a betrayal of that promise, a surrender to the elements that constantly threaten to engulf this lonely outpost. The weight of this responsibility is immense. Each flicker of doubt, a storm cloud on your inner horizon. Mellow voice, a fleeting glimpse of a distant ship, its sails white against the gray sea, passing too far to notice your solitary tower. That was before you truly understood the precariousness of your situation, before the oil level became such a stark indicator of your dwindling time. Now, the sight of any sail is a complex mixture of hope for much-needed supplies and fear of attracting unwanted attention, or worse, being ignored. You have no way to signal them effectively, only the steady pulse of the lamp to communicate your presence. You remember a detail from a book you found in the keeper's meager collection, a historical account of a similar lighthouse on a different coast. It spoke of the keepers meticulously cataloging every ounce of oil, every pound of biscuit, as if their lives depended on it, which, of course, they did. This practice, a form of practical bookkeeping for survival, seems a stark contrast to the outgoing keeper's casual departure. The book also mentioned a scholarly debate among contemporary scholars about whether lighthouse keepers were viewed more as essential workers or as dangerous eccentrics, isolated from society. As you assess the oil reservoir, a flicker of an idea, almost a jest, crosses your mind. Perhaps you could siphon a small amount of the lamp oil for a makeshift candle, just to read by in the lower chambers, saving the main reservoir for the lamp itself. This thought, a small rebellion against the stark reality, brings a brief, almost unwelcome smile to your lips. It's a foolish notion, considering the strictures of your duty, but it highlights the desperate measures one might consider when facing such profound isolation and limited resources. The choice crystallizes. You must ration the oil. Lowering the flame, even slightly, feels like a direct defiance of your core purpose. Yet, the idea of facing the night with an empty stomach, your strength sapped, unable to perform your duties, is equally terrifying. You reach for the metal spout, your hand steady, but your mind wrestling with the implications. This decision is not merely about managing supplies. It's about defining the keeper you are becoming, one who perhaps prioritizes a guiding light over personal comfort, or one who understands that without a strong keeper, the light itself is meaningless. You decide to reduce the oil. Carefully, you adjust the mechanism, allowing a slightly smaller stream to feed the wick. The flame seems to dim, a subtle but noticeable difference in its intensity. You then turn your attention to your own meager provisions, taking a smaller portion of dried fish than you had intended. The taste is still bland, but the gnawing hunger is now a more present, insistent companion. This balance struck between the beacon and your own body now defines your days. The rough-hewn wooden tools you use to maintain the lamp now feel familiar in your hands. Hours spent scanning the vast, unbroken line where the gray ocean meets the paler sky become a familiar ache in your eyes. This solitary existence on the island, a speck of rock against the immense Atlantic, offers little in the way of company. Today, however, a small sailing vessel, its white sails catching the brisk wind, appears on the far edge of your vision. You can make out figures on its deck, small and indistinct, moving about their lives. but they seem oblivious to your lonely vigil atop the stone tower. This constant, unacknowledged presence of distant humanity sharpens the profound silence that settles once they have passed, leaving you once again with only the endless sigh of the waves. The lack of a reciprocal signal from the passing ship is not unexpected, yet it leaves a faint hollowness. You find yourself tracing patterns in the moisture that gathers on the thick glass of the lantern room, a silent conversation with the empty sea that stretches in every direction. These idle movements, this quiet tracing of lines, offer a fleeting distraction from the ceaseless, rhythmic roar of the waves below. Each crash against the rocks is a reminder of the powerful, untamed forces that shape your world, a world that feels both immense and incredibly small. Building on the necessary conservation of lamp oil, a choice made earlier to ensure the light's longevity, you notice the flame itself seems to burn with a slightly dimmer, more cautious glow tonight. This reduced intensity is a direct consequence of that difficult decision, a constant visual cue of your dwindling resources and the sacrifices required to maintain your duty. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach, too, is more pronounced, a persistent reminder of the hunger you chose to endure rather than diminish the vital beacon. These physical sensations are now deeply ingrained parts of your daily experience. Meanwhile, the stark reality of your situation is amplified by the sheer scale of the ocean that surrounds you, a panorama that offers no immediate comfort. Your days are often spent in a patient vigil, observing the infrequent passages of ships that sail these waters. Today's encounter with the small vessel, a mere silhouette against the horizon, underscores this isolation. The distant shapes of clouds drift and morph, providing a brief visual respite from the ever-present churning sea. The wind, which had been steadily blowing, now begins to shift, carrying with it a subtle change in the sea's mood. You can feel the slight vibration through the stone floor as the waves grow larger, their sounds deepening into a more urgent roar. This change in the ocean's temperament prompts a fresh wave of awareness regarding your own condition. Your personal hunger, a consequence of prioritizing the lamp's oil supply, makes you more sensitive to the island's own limited sustenance. This heightened awareness draws your attention to the island's sparse vegetation, the tough, salt-tolerant plants that manage to cling to the rocky soil. Their slightly bitter taste, a flavor you've come to accept as part of your diet, feels less sustaining when your body's own reserves are depleted. The seep of fresh water you discovered earlier, a small but vital lifeline, is a constant reassurance, though you are acutely aware of how precious every drop is becoming. Considering the island's resources, you find yourself contemplating how best to ensure your long-term survival, a thought that has become more pressing with each passing day. The harsh conditions demand a constant assessment of what is most critical. It is a matter of balancing the immediate need to keep the lamp burning brightly against the personal need to sustain yourself, a delicate tightrope walk that defines your existence here. You realize that the island itself is slowly revealing its secrets, and its challenges are forcing a deeper understanding of your own resilience. The routine of your duties has become second nature, but the environmental pressures continue to mount. The constant battle against the elements, coupled with the need for careful management of scarce provisions, shapes your every action and thought. The stark reality of this isolated post is that every decision, no matter how small, has far-reaching consequences. The choice to conserve oil made out of necessity has directly impacted your physical well-being, making you more susceptible to the island's unforgiving nature. This understanding breeds a different kind of vigilance, one that extends beyond the lamp itself to encompass your own survival. The island, in its raw beauty and unforgiving nature, demands a profound respect. You observe how the seabirds, their cries sharp and piercing, seem to understand the rhythms of this place far better than you do. Their ability to find sustenance and navigate the storms without complaint is a humbling sight, a silent lesson in adaptation and endurance. The rough bark of the stunted trees, worn smooth by countless winds, offers a tangible connection to the island's enduring spirit. As you look out at the endless expanse, a question forms in your mind. How did others who held this post before you manage to find not just survival, but a sense of peace in such profound isolation? You feel the significance of this enduring question in your bones. The salt spray that kissed your face felt colder today, a familiar sharpness that reminded you of the dwindling lamp oil, a consequence of your decision in Chapter 5 to conserve it. Your hunger, too, was a constant, dull ache, a reminder of the reduced rations you'd imposed upon yourself in the preceding chapter. While the island's tough grasses offered sustenance, their slightly bitter taste did little to lift your spirits. And the freshwater seep, though life-giving, was a meager supply. The gulls' sharp cries, once a novelty, now seemed to mock the island's stark emptiness. You leaned against the wind-battered tree, its rough bark a testament to its own struggle against the elements, and felt the damp earth beneath your boots, a stark contrast to the relentless stone that formed your tower home. This place demanded a constant accounting of resources, and the recent storm had certainly tested your careful planning. The storm had raged for 2 nights, a tempest of wind and water that rattled the very foundations of your stone tower. Now, as the tempest retreated, leaving the sky bruised and the sea a churning gray, the shores of your island were littered with the sea's offerings. Amongst the tangled kelp and splintered wood, a more substantial form caught your eye, the shattered remains of a small boat. Its hull was broken, its mast snapped like a dry twig, yet a part of it, perhaps a sturdy section of the keel or a few intact planks, seemed salvageable. A flicker of an idea, audacious and tinged with the desperation born of your isolation, began to form. This wreckage was more than just debris. It was a potential pathway, however perilous, away from this lonely rock. You found yourself caught in a familiar internal tug-of-war, a deliberation that had become a constant companion on this remote outpost. The temptation to try and mend this broken vessel, to laboriously stitch together its fractured pieces, and perhaps, with a surge of luck and immense effort, make it seaworthy enough to brave the vast ocean towards the mainland, was strong. Such a journey, though fraught with unimaginable peril, offered the promise of much-needed supplies and perhaps a brief respite from the crushing solitude. Yet the practical side of you, honed by months of careful survival, argued for a more grounded approach, urging you to salvage the usable planks and sturdy ropes from the wreckage. These salvaged materials, you reasoned, could be put to more immediate use, strengthening the tower's worn seawall, patching the leaks that had begun to appear in your own shelter, or reinforcing the small structure where you stored your dwindling provisions. The thought of undertaking such repairs, of weaving new purpose into the remnants of a lost voyage, brought a different kind of satisfaction, a tangible improvement to your immediate surroundings. This choice presented a stark contrast, a gamble on a distant, uncertain future versus a practical investment in the present. The raw timber, smelling faintly of brine and decay, held the weight of both possibilities. The recent storm had also revealed a new need to reinforce the island's precarious defenses. The relentless Atlantic waves had found new weaknesses in the stone seawall, protecting the base of your tower. A small breach, previously a minor concern, had widened during the tempest, allowing saltwater to seep further inland. Should you dedicate your precious daylight hours to patching this breach, using the rough stones that dotted the shoreline, you would be diverting energy that could otherwise be used for foraging or tending the lamp. The taste of the stale biscuit you'd eaten earlier did little to buoy your resolve, and the lingering hunger was a constant reminder of your precarious food stores. Your mind turned to the delicate balance of your situation. The oil for the lamp, a direct result of your decision in Chapter 5 to conserve it, meant the light burned with a dimmer, less reassuring glow. This diminished brilliance, coupled with your own increasing hunger, served as a stark testament to the hard choices you'd already made. The island's sparse resources offered little buffer, and any significant undertaking now would require a further sacrifice, either of the lamp's vital function or your own meager sustenance. You recalled the stark reality of Chapter 6, where the scarcity of food had sharpened your awareness of the island's unforgiving nature, and the few tough greens you'd found offered little solace. A small, almost humorous thought struck you. Perhaps you could use some of the salvaged rope from the wrecked boat to create a better system for hauling water from the seep. It was a small improvement, but on this island, even the smallest comforts felt like major victories. You remembered reading in one of the salvaged books about an ancient Roman practice of using elaborate pulley systems for just such tasks, a testament to human ingenuity even in the face of isolation. It was a curious fact, a tiny spark of connection to a distant past, and it made the prospect of working with the salvaged materials seem less like a chore and more like a continuation of a long-held human tradition. The decision weighed heavily, a familiar burden on your shoulders. Do you gamble on the boat, a risky venture that could lead to escape or utter ruin? Or do you focus on immediate improvements, strengthening your current fragile existence? The ongoing scholarly debate about the true nature of seafaring resilience in the 17th century seemed to echo in the wind. Some argued for calculated risks, while others championed the virtues of thorough preparation and resourcefulness. Your own experience leaned towards the latter, yet the sheer soul-crushing isolation made the former option an alluring siren song. You continued to survey the scattered remnants of the boat, feeling the rough texture of the weathered wood beneath your fingertips. The wind whipped strands of hair across your face, and you instinctively brushed them aside. The island's landscape, carved by countless storms, offered a silent but powerful lesson in adaptation. The decision you made now would ripple through the coming days, shaping your path forward on this solitary stage. Your selection of materials has anchored you to this ancient pattern. The routine of tending the lighthouse has become deeply ingrained, a rhythm that mirrors the ceaseless push and pull of the Atlantic. Each turn of the wick, each polishing of the great glass lens is a small victory against the encroaching darkness and the vast indifference of the sea. Your own experience leans towards the latter, yet the sheer soul-crushing isolation made the former option an alluring siren song. You continued to survey the scattered remnants of the boat, feeling the rough texture of the weathered wood beneath your fingertips. The wind whipped strands of hair across your face, and you instinctively brushed them aside. The island's landscape, carved by countless storms, offered a silent but powerful lesson in adaptation. The decision you made now would ripple through the coming days, shaping your path forward on this solitary stage. Your selection of materials has anchored you to this ancient pattern. The routine of tending the lighthouse has become deeply ingrained, a rhythm that mirrors the ceaseless push and pull of the Atlantic. Each turn of the wick, each polishing of the great glass lens is a small victory against the encroaching darkness and the vast indifference of the sea. You learn to read the subtle shifts in the waves, the way the wind alters its song through the stones of the tower, signs that speak of impending weather changes more reliably than any chart. This careful vigilance, this dedication to the light, has become the bedrock of your existence on this lonely outpost. During this time, a sense of quiet competence has begun to replace the initial disorientation. you discover a hidden compartment tucked away behind a loose stone near the lamp room's hearth. Inside, nestled amongst dried seaweed and a few smooth sea-worn pebbles, you find a small collection of books, their pages brittle and their bindings cracked. These volumes, filled with tales of distant lands, ancient philosophies, and the poetry of lives lived far from the ocean's roar, offer a precious connection to a world beyond your immediate reality, a mental escape from the constant physical demands of your solitary duty. As you carefully lift one of these books, the warm glow of the lamp on your face is a comforting presence, a familiar light in the encroaching dusk. The polished smoothness of the worn pages as you turn them offers a different texture, a welcome contrast to the rough stone of the tower walls and the sea-bleached wood of your meager furnishings. The subtle, dried ink smell mingles faintly with the lamp oil, a new aroma that whispers of worlds contained within. This simple discovery, this access to thought and imagination begins to shape your days in unexpected ways. Building on this newfound mental resource, you begin to integrate reading into your daily tasks, finding brief moments of respite to immerse yourself in these pages. This practice fosters a deeper understanding of the world and offers a different kind of sustenance, one that nourishes the mind rather than just the body. You start to see the island not merely as a place of isolation and duty, but as a vantage point from which to contemplate the vastness of human experience, captured within these printed words. The weight of the lamp, once a symbol of your burden, now feels like the anchor of your purpose. Meanwhile, the memory of your choice to conserve lamp oil in Chapter 5 continues to influence your daily life. The light, while still steady, burns with a slightly diminished intensity, and you find yourself rationing your own meager food stores with even greater strictness. This ongoing sacrifice, this constant balancing act between your duty to the passing ships and your own physical well-being has honed your resilience. You understand that the light must not fail, and this conviction often pushes your own needs to the background, a quiet but persistent self-denial. Consequently, your exploration of the island for sustenance in Chapter 4 becomes even more critical. You venture further afield, seeking out the tough, salt-tolerant plants that cling stubbornly to the rocky soil, their slightly bitter taste a familiar, if uninspiring, flavor. The discovery of a small seep of fresh water trickling from a fissure in the rock face remains a lifeline, a testament to the island's sparse but vital resources. You learn to gather this water in a wide, flat stone basin, its surface worn smooth by countless tides. Additionally, the need to make your meager provisions last has led you to adopt more resourceful methods of preparation. You find yourself grinding dried seaweed into a coarse flour to mix with stale biscuit, a combination that, while not exactly palatable, adds substance to your meals. The act of preparing this food, of coaxing sustenance from the unforgiving landscape, becomes another ritual, another way to assert control in a life dictated by the sea and the elements. You feel the rough texture of the dried kelp in your hands as you crush it, a small act of defiance against hunger. Furthermore, your observation of the distant ships, as noted in Chapter 6, takes on a new dimension. While you still scan the horizon with a mixture of hope and caution, you now also reflect on the lives aboard those vessels, the journeys they undertake, the connections they represent. The books you have found have given you a broader perspective, allowing you to imagine the complexities of the world beyond your isolated tower. And this contemplation adds a layer of depth to your vigil. Moreover, the choice made in Chapter 7 regarding the wreckage of the small boat continues to shape your approach to resourcefulness. By salvaging planks and ropes, you have managed to reinforce some of the weaker sections of the lighthouse's exterior, strengthening its defense against the relentless sea. This practical application of salvaged materials, this turning of a disaster into a means of preservation, underscores the importance of careful planning and the ability to adapt, even with limited means. This process of adaptation and learning has instilled a deep sense of connection to the island itself. You begin to understand its moods, its subtle shifts, its enduring strength. The rough, salt-bitten grass underfoot, the sharp cry of a distant seagull, these are no longer mere environmental details, but elements of a world you are becoming a part of, a world you are responsible for. The warmth of the lamp, the smoothness of the book pages, the taste of the carefully rationed water, all contribute to this growing sense of belonging. As the days turn into weeks, the routine of the lamp becomes less of a chore and more of a partnership. You feel the steady pulse of the flame, a living thing you nurture and protect. The light that streams out from your tower is not just a warning, but a symbol of constancy in a world of change, a small, unwavering point in the vast, untamed ocean. This work, this singular dedication, grants you a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose found in the most solitary of existences. The echoes of this newfound knowledge and the growing self-reliance will guide your hand as you face the challenges ahead. The wind, carrying the sharp tang of salt and the deep chill of the Atlantic, whips your rough-spun tunic around your legs. The sea, a turbulent expanse of gray and white, churns with a restless energy that mirrors the churning in your own gut. You scan the horizon, the accustomed empty stretch. Your gaze drifts back to the scattered wreckage along the shore, remnants of a recent brutal storm. Among the tangled seaweed and splintered wood, a flash of dark, sodden fabric catches your eye. It's a piece of a small vessel, almost entirely consumed by the sea's fury, yet it holds a shape that suggests a human form clinging to it. A wave recedes, revealing the figure more clearly. It is a person, indeed, huddled and still, but there is a faint movement, a twitch of an arm. Your own stores are a constant worry. The biscuits are nearly gone, the dried fish is a mere handful, and the precious lamp oil, which you've been carefully conserving since that difficult choice in Chapter 5 to trim its burning, feels like a king's ransom. The memory of your gnawing hunger then, and the dimming light that casts longer shadows, returns with a keen edge. Yet, the sight of another soul so utterly at the mercy of the elements stirs a deep, unsettling conflict within you. Part of you recoils from the potential drain on your meager resources. Caring for another, even for a short time, means sharing your water, your food, and the precious warmth of the lighthouse. The thought of the lamp burning lower or your own strength failing is a stark and immediate threat. Your duty is to the light, to the ships that might pass unseen in the darkness. To falter in that duty, even for a human life, feels like a betrayal of the very purpose that brought you to this isolated rock. This island demands a singular focus for survival, a lesson learned with every dawn. However, another part of you, a part you'd almost forgotten existed amidst the stark reality of your existence here, feels a powerful pull towards the desperate figure. It's the echo of human connection, the memory of shared laughter or a comforting word, a stark contrast to the ceaseless roar of the ocean and the hollow silence of your days. The survivor is a stark reminder that your isolation, while protective, also separates you from the very world you serve. To ignore this plea, this tangible piece of humanity washed ashore, feels like a profound abandonment, a severing of the last thread to a shared existence. You find yourself weighing the practicality of self-preservation against the intangible weight of empathy. The wreckage itself, the very boat that brought this person here, is battered beyond recognition, offering no immediate hope of repair. You recall the decision made in Chapter 7 when you chose to break down the salvaged wreckage for useful materials rather than attempt a risky repair of a similar, albeit less damaged, find. That choice was driven by practicality, a focus on strengthening your own immediate situation. But this is different. This is a living, breathing being, not just wood and rope. A faint cough, a weak, rasping sound, drifts towards you on the wind. It's a sound that pierces through your calculations, a direct appeal that bypasses logic. The memory of your own initial disorientation upon arrival, the utter helplessness of that first day, surfaces unbidden. You had no one then, no guidance beyond the hurried instructions of the previous keeper, and the weight of that loneliness was almost unbearable. To leave this person to the indifferent sea now would be to inflict that same despair, that same absolute solitude on another. You take a step towards the water's edge, your worn boots crunching on the pebbles. The distance between you and the survivor seems immense, an ocean in itself, filled with the unspoken questions of need and capacity. Your mind races, cataloging the dwindling supplies. A handful of dried dates, their sweetness a fading memory, a small pouch of coarse flour, and that carefully rationed oil. Even the fresh water seep, discovered in Chapter 4, requires a journey across the island's rough terrain, a journey you've made more often lately as the initial stored water dwindled. A decision forms, not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow, determined hardening within you. Your duty to the light remains, but it is a duty to humanity, and humanity is not an abstract concept found on a distant horizon, but a present reality clinging to wreckage. The choice crystallizes. You will offer what little aid you can, even if it means enduring greater hardship yourself. This island has taught you resilience, and now it demands compassion, a quality as vital for survival in its own way as a well-tended lamp. You begin to gather what you can carry, a length of sturdy rope that you salvaged from the earlier wreckage, a relatively intact coil of sailcloth, and your knife. The effort of moving with purpose, of actively seeking to help rather than merely endure, sparks a flicker of something akin to hope, a feeling that has been scarce on this windswept rock. The memory of the few books you found in Chapter 8, filled with tales of bravery and sacrifice, offers a faint resonance with the path you are now choosing. With a deep breath, you wade into the shallows, the icy water biting at your ankles. The survivor stirs as you approach, a weak groan escaping their lips. You speak softly, your voice rough from disuse, offering words of reassurance, though you feel little reassurance yourself. The task of pulling them from the water, of getting them to the relative shelter of the lighthouse, feels monumental. Their skin is pale, their breathing shallow, and the stench of the sea clings to them, a potent reminder of their near-death ordeal. Once you have them inside the lighthouse, the cool, damp air of the stone tower envelops you both. You carefully lay the survivor down on your own rough cot, the straw rustling beneath their weight. Their eyes, when they open, are a clouded blue, filled with a desperate plea for understanding. The sheer vulnerability of their presence is overwhelming. You fetch water from the stored supply, carefully offering it in small sips, watching as they struggle to swallow. Your own thirst, a constant companion, is momentarily forgotten. The work is arduous. You clean the wounds on their arms and legs, the skin torn and abraded by the sea. The small medical kit you found amongst the outgoing keeper's sparse belongings, a collection of dried herbs and bandages, seems woefully inadequate for the task, but you use it with the utmost care. You note the survivor's thin frame, suggesting their own struggles before their vessel met its end. It's clear they haven't eaten well in a long time, a sentiment you understand intimately from the lean periods of your own existence. You then turn your attention to the lamp. The previous decision to conserve oil, made in Chapter 5, means the reservoir is already less than half full. Now, you must decide how much to risk for this stranger. Do you allow the light to burn with its usual steady strength, thus accelerating your own depletion of this vital resource? Or do you temper its flame, risking a less effective beacon for the sake of immediate necessity? The conflict is palpable, a direct consequence of this unexpected arrival. You find yourself tearing strips from your own remaining sailcloth to create makeshift bandages and to reinforce the survivor's sodden clothing. This act of giving, of sharing your last reserves, leaves you feeling exposed and vulnerable. The survivor watches you with a look of dazed gratitude, their gaze following your every movement. You try to offer a small, encouraging smile, a gesture that feels alien and forced after so much solitude. The weight of responsibility for another life presses down, a heavy burden added to your already demanding duties. The survivor, a young man named Thomas, whispers his name, his voice barely audible. He speaks of a storm that overtook his small trading vessel, a tempest that seemed to come from nowhere, tearing sails and snapping masts with terrifying speed. He was thrown overboard, clinging to a fragment of the hull for what felt like an eternity before washing ashore here on your isolated rock. His tale of loss and survival is a stark reminder of the sea's power, a power you face every day. Later, as the light outside begins to fade, painting the sky with bruised purples and oranges, you prepare a meager meal. A handful of your precious flour, mixed with water and cooked over the small fire you tend for warmth, is offered to Thomas. You watch as he eats, his hunger so profound it is almost painful to witness. Your own stomach rumbles, a hollow ache, but you push the sensation aside. This shared meal, however meager, represents a connection, a breach in the wall of your isolation. You spend the rest of the evening tending to Thomas, ensuring he is as comfortable as possible. The lamp, a steady, vital presence, casts its warm glow across the small interior, its light seeming to hold a new significance now, a symbol of sanctuary for both of you. The wind howls outside, a reminder of the enduring power of nature. But within these stone walls, a fragile sense of shared existence has begun to bloom. You realize that your duty to the light has, in a way, extended to this lost soul. You have become witness to something profound, a testament to the unexpected connections that can forge themselves in the crucible of survival. The sea, still churning from the recent storm, has deposited wreckage along the shore, among which you find not only the shattered remnants of a small boat, but also, tangled in seaweed, a seabird with a broken wing. Your previous choice to conserve the lamp oil meant your own rations were also reduced, leaving you with a constant, dull ache in your stomach. The survivor you aided, Thomas, though slowly regaining his strength, coughs weakly by the meager fire you've managed to keep going, his presence a constant reminder of your shared, precarious existence and the dwindling stores. Now, faced with the injured bird, a creature entirely dependent on your care, you must again weigh the cost of compassion against your own pressing needs. You approach the distressed bird cautiously, its one good eye wide with fear. Its frantic attempts to flutter away are hampered by the twisted wing, a stark mirror to the island's own harshness that you have come to understand so intimately. The raw, acrid smell of the sea salt on the bird's damp feathers fills your nostrils as you extend a hand, your own hunger a sharp tang at the sight of its distress. The thought of tending to another living thing, beyond the demanding but predictable needs of the lighthouse, feels daunting when your own reserves are so low, a consequence of the difficult choice you made to conserve lamp oil back in Chapter 5. You approach the distressed bird cautiously, its one good eye wide with fear. Its frantic attempts to flutter away are hampered by the twisted wing, a stark mirror to the island's own harshness that you have come to understand so intimately. The raw, acrid smell of the sea salt on the bird's damp feathers fills your nostrils as you extend a hand, your own hunger a sharp pang at the sight of its distress. The thought of tending to another living thing, beyond the demanding but predictable needs of the lighthouse, feels daunting when your own reserves are so low, a consequence of the difficult choice you made to conserve lamp oil back in Chapter 5. The outgoing keeper, in his haste to leave, had mentioned a small medicinal plant that grew in the crevices of the higher cliffs, its leaves said to have healing properties. Reaching it would mean a difficult climb, a further expenditure of your limited energy and time, precious resources that could instead be spent reinforcing the lighthouse or foraging for more edible roots. Yet, the sight of the bird's suffering pulls at something deep within you, a recognition of shared vulnerability on this isolated rock. The question of whether to dedicate your dwindling strength to this creature, or to focus solely on the larger, more immediate task of survival, weighs heavily. Thomas, watching from his rough pallet of dried grass, coughs again, a dry, rasping sound that cuts through the rhythmic shush of the receding waves. His weakened state, a result of his ordeal and the limited food available, adds another layer to your considerations. If you spend time tending to the bird, you are less able to prepare the evening meal or gather more firewood, tasks essential for both your and Thomas's immediate well-being. This island demands a constant, unforgiving accounting of every effort, every morsel of food, every drop of oil. The outgoing keeper had also left a small, albeit tattered, book on local flora and fauna, which you discovered in Chapter 8, tucked away in a forgotten nook of the lighthouse. Flipping through its pages, you find a description and illustration of the very plant you need. It details how to prepare a poultice from its crushed leaves, suggesting it might aid in mending broken bones, but also warns of its bitter taste and the potential for stomach upset if too much is consumed. This knowledge offers a sliver of hope, a more informed path than simply guessing, but the journey to gather it remains a significant undertaking. You find yourself weighing the immediate discomfort of your hunger against the long-term implications of your actions. If you choose to ignore the bird, its suffering will continue, a small tragedy on the edge of your awareness, and you will be left to wrestle with the quiet burden of that choice. If you decide to help, the risk is tangible: further depletion of your strength, more strain on your meager provisions, and the potential for Thomas's condition to worsen due to your divided attention. The constant cycle of decision-making, each with its own set of unavoidable consequences, has become the relentless tide of your existence here. The memory of the outgoing keeper's curt farewell and his eagerness to depart resurfaces. He offered no guidance, no shared wisdom about this life, only the stark reality of his departure. This isolation breeds a profound self-reliance, but it also sharpens the need for connection, for any sign that humanity extends even to this remote corner of the world. Helping the bird, in a way, feels like reaching out to that lost connection, a small act of defiance against the overwhelming solitude that presses in from all sides. A moment of stillness settles as you make your decision. The raw wind whispers around the stone tower, carrying the cries of distant gulls. But inside the lighthouse, a different kind of quiet prevails. The choice you make now will not only affect the bird and Thomas, but will also further shape your own understanding of your role and your resilience on this lonely outpost. The very fabric of your days is woven from these constant negotiations between duty, necessity, and the faint echoes of empathy. Part of you recoils from the immense effort required to gather the healing plant and prepare it, a task that might steal precious energy needed to keep the lamp burning brightly, especially given the reduced oil supply from your earlier conservation efforts. Yet another part of you, awakened by the books discovered in the Lighthouse and the shared plight with Thomas, recognizes that true survival might lie not just in maintaining the light, but in preserving the very essence of care and connection, however small. You find yourself moving towards the door, your resolve firming. The cool, damp air on your face is a familiar sensation as you step outside the lighthouse. You orient yourself towards the higher cliffs, recalling the rough path you glimpsed during your initial explorations, a place where the hardy seagrass gave way to more barren rock. The prospect of the climb is daunting, the thought of the precious oil reservoir in the lamp, already lower than you'd like, a constant worry. However, the injured bird, a small, silent testament to the island's unforgiving nature, spurs you onward, a quiet challenge to your own survival. The ascent is more arduous than you anticipated. Your worn boots slip on patches of slick, sea-worn stone, and the wind tugs at your coarse wool tunic, threatening your balance. You pause often to catch your breath, your breathing growing shallow with the exertion. Below, the lighthouse stands as a solitary sentinel, a fragile beacon against the immense, unyielding ocean. The memory of your hunger, a constant companion since the decision to ration oil, sharpens your focus on the task at hand, reminding you of the stakes involved in every action. Reaching the designated crevice, you carefully gather a handful of the broad, fleshy leaves, their surface cool and slightly sticky to the touch. The plant's scent is pungent, a sharp, green aroma that stings your nostrils slightly, quite unlike the sweeter, earthy smells of the coastal plants you found earlier. You wrap them gently in a scrap of cloth, acutely aware that their potency, as described in the book, is tied to their freshness. The journey back down feels both faster and more precarious, each step mindful of the precious cargo you carry. Back in the relative shelter of the lighthouse, you begin the painstaking process of preparing the poultice, crushing the leaves with a smooth river stone you've kept for such tasks. The bitter, herbaceous scent intensifies, a stark contrast to the familiar aroma of lamp oil. You then carefully apply the crushed leaves to the bird's injured wing, its tiny heart beating wildly against your palm. Thomas watches, his gaze shifting between your careful ministrations and the dwindling oil in the lamp, a silent acknowledgement of the complex demands of your shared existence. You carry this moment with you as the world continues around you. The sea has calmed, leaving behind a scattering of seaweed and broken shells along the shore. You look at the remnants of the small boat discovered after the storm, its timbers splintered and warped by the waves. Recalling the dwindling lamp oil and the gnawing hunger that has become your constant companion, you feel the sting of your previous decision to ignore the suffering seabird, its plight a quiet shadow on your awareness. You also remember the stern captain of the merchant ship, his terse offer of a few supplies after you'd signaled him. The small bag of dried peas and a single rough woolen blanket had been a welcome, if temporary, relief. The island's meager resources demand constant vigilance, a lesson you've learned in the quiet hours between the rhythmic crash of the waves. You turn your attention to the salvaged planks from the wrecked boat, their surfaces still damp and smelling faintly of salt and brine. The outgoing keeper's logbook, a worn volume bound in faded leather, lies open on a makeshift table inside the lighthouse. It details the upkeep of the lamp, the expected deliveries of oil and provisions, and the infrequent visits from supply ships, a stark contrast to your current reality of scarcity. He noted the importance of maintaining the seawall, a detail you'd chosen to overlook in your urgent need to prepare the lamp for your first night. That decision has left a small breach in the stones, a point where the incoming tide occasionally splashes further inland than it should. With the passing of the storm and the departure of the merchant ship, a different kind of silence has settled over the island, one punctuated by the mournful cries of gulls rather than the roar of wind and waves. The few dried peas you received are nearly gone, and the lamp, though trimmed to burn lower, still consumes the oil at a rate that fills you with a low, persistent worry. You find yourself rationing not just your food, but also your effort, each movement requiring a conscious calculation of its necessity. The memory of the bird, its small life surrendered to the sea's indifference because you felt you could not spare the few herbs you'd found for its wound, still pricks at your conscience. You begin to examine the salvaged wood more closely, feeling the grain beneath your fingertips. Some pieces are sound enough, while others are rotten and crumble easily. The keeper's log also mentions a small, rarely used store of pitch, a sticky, dark substance derived from pine trees, used for sealing and waterproofing. If you can locate it, it might prove invaluable for mending the seawall or even attempting to patch the small fishing boat you discovered. The thought of reaching the mainland, of seeing another human face, flickers like a weak flame in the back of your mind. But the sheer effort of repairing a vessel seems insurmountable with your current resources and knowledge. The wind, now gentler, carries a new sound, a rhythmic chirping that draws your attention to the rocky crevices near the lighthouse base. It is a family of small birds, their nests woven from dried grass and seawool, their chicks a cluster of peeping mouths. You recall a passage in one of the books you discovered, a collection of old sea shanties that mentioned the ingenuity of sailors in preserving food. They dried fish and salted meat, extending the shelf life of their catches. This island, while harsh, does provide its own bounty if one knows where and how to look, and the thought of finding a sustainable food source takes root. You decide to focus on the immediate task of reinforcing the lighthouse itself, rather than dreaming of distant voyages. The keeper's log mentions the pitch being stored in a small, dry cave on the eastern side of the island, a place you haven't yet explored. The journey there involves navigating a stretch of sharp, barnacle-encrusted rocks. You carefully place your worn boots, their leather stiff and cracked, onto the most stable stones, testing each step before committing your weight. The rough texture of the rock presses through the thin soles of your boots, a familiar sensation of the island's unyielding nature. Finding the cave is a small victory. Inside, protected from the sea spray, are several large earthenware pots, one of which contains a surprisingly well-preserved store of black pitch. Its thick, tar-like consistency is a stark contrast to the smooth, cool glass of the lighthouse lens you cleaned so meticulously. The smell of the pitch is pungent, sharp, and resinous, a scent that promises utility and defense against the encroaching elements. The keeper's log also noted that pitch, when mixed with sand, could be used to create a more durable mortar for repairs. As you gather some of the pitch, you notice a small, crudely carved wooden bird lying near the pots. It's similar to the small seabirds you saw nesting, a simple, charming piece of work. A faint, almost forgotten memory surfaces. The outgoing keeper, just before he departed, had been whittling something with his knife, his brow furrowed in concentration, before stuffing it into his sea chest. Perhaps this was his creation, left behind. It's a fleeting, personal touch in this otherwise stark and functional place, a reminder of the lives that have passed through here. You return to the lighthouse with your prize, the weight of the pitch pots a welcome burden. The thought of the seawall's breach still troubles you. The logbook details how the stone was laid, interlocked with a strong binding mortar, a practice that would have prevented the current damage. You find yourself comparing the rough, natural strength of the island stone to the more refined yet vulnerable materials of the outside world. Your decision to prioritize the lamp's immediate needs over repairing that wall now seems a foolish gamble, a youthful impatience with the long game of preservation. The lamp needs tending again, its steady, reassuring glow a constant presence in your solitary world. You add a small amount of oil, the familiar, slightly acrid smell filling your nostrils. The act of trimming the wick, of ensuring the flame burns true, has become a ritual, a small point of control in a life dictated by the vast, indifferent ocean. You reflect on the books, how they offered glimpses of distant lands and different lives, a stark contrast to the unvarying horizon you now face. The knowledge held within those pages, however, has begun to offer practical advice, inspiring you to look for solutions within the island's own resources. As you prepare to secure the lighthouse for the night, you notice a faint, rhythmic tapping sound coming from the main support beam. It is a wood beetle burrowing into the aged wood. The logbook had mentioned the potential for such pests and the importance of regular inspection. The pitch, you realize, could also be used to seal off potential entry points for these creatures, further protecting the structural integrity of your home. This island demands a constant, multifaceted approach to survival. There is no single task that stands alone. You consider the incoming supplies that are due, or rather, that should be due, according to the outgoing keeper's log. The next scheduled delivery is weeks away. The thought of that long stretch without replenishment is a cold knot in your stomach. However, the discovery of the pitch and the potential to find more food sources, perhaps even small edible roots like those described in one of your books, offers a glimmer of hope. The island's own larder, if you can learn its secrets, might just see you through. The memory of the seabird, its feathery body growing still on the rocks after you'd chosen not to risk your own meager supplies for it, returns with a dull ache. It was a harsh lesson in the unwritten rules of this isolated existence. Your strength and your ability to keep the light burning are directly tied to your own survival. But the quiet burden of that decision remains. Perhaps, you muse, the carved bird left behind by the previous keeper was a silent testament to a similar internal struggle, a small human imprint on the vastness. As night falls, you light the lamp, its steady beam cutting through the darkness. You can almost feel the island's ancient pulse beneath your feet, a rhythm of tides and seasons that predates human memory. The pitch, the books, the knowledge of the island's edible plants, these are the tools now, more valuable than any coin. The weight of self-reliance settles into your understanding. A dark smudge on the horizon catches your eye. It grows steadily larger, resolving into the shape of a ship, its sails a deep, rich brown against the pale sky. This vessel is larger than any you have witnessed since your arrival on this lonely rock, its masts reaching higher, its hull sitting deeper in the water. Its course is set directly towards your island, a steady, unhurried progress that sets your mind to whirring with possibilities and a prickle of unease. The decision of how to greet this visitor weighs heavily upon you. To light a beacon, a signal fire perhaps, would certainly draw their attention. This could mean much-needed supplies, news from the mainland, a fleeting human connection that your solitary existence craves with an almost physical ache. Yet, the outgoing keeper's hurried departure and his cryptic warnings about the sea's unpredictable nature return to your thoughts. Who knows what manner of men sail these waters in such a sturdy ship? The thought of revealing your isolated position, your own limited stores, and the sheer vulnerability of your guardianship makes your breath catch. What if they are pirates, or smugglers, or men with darker intentions than simply seeking safe passage? Your meager defenses would be no match for a determined crew, and the lamp, the very reason for your presence here, would be their first target, plunging the coast into a new and terrible darkness. Therefore, a deep conflict takes root within you. A part of you yearns for the sound of another human voice, a shared meal, a glimpse of a world beyond the ceaseless horizon. The memory of the harsh, bitter taste of the sea greens you've learned to forage and the gnawing emptiness they often leave behind makes the idea of a well-stocked ship a tantalizing prospect. You recall how, after you chose to focus on reinforcing the lighthouse's foundation rather than attempting to repair the broken seawall, the storms have been less of a threat to the structure itself, but the island's meager offerings have become even more precious. Conversely, your ingrained duty to the light, your solemn promise to keep it burning, anchors your thoughts. This vessel, while potentially a bringer of aid, also represents an unknown variable, a disruption to the predictable rhythm of your days. To engage with them might mean diverting precious time and energy, leaving the lamp unattended for longer than is wise, especially as the wind begins to pick up, a subtle shift felt in the creak of the stones around you. You find yourself torn between the potential reward of contact and the ingrained caution born of isolation and responsibility. The desire for companionship and sustenance clashes with the primal need for self-preservation and the unwavering commitment to your watch. The ship continues its steady approach, forcing your hand, the vast expanse of the ocean suddenly feeling both immense and incredibly small, filled with unseen possibilities. Then, you consider the fate of the injured seabird you found after the last storm. Recalling your decision not to disturb it, to leave it to its own struggle, a quiet weight settles in your chest. That choice, made to preserve your own dwindling resources, now feels like a small, persistent shadow. This new encounter, with its potential for both great gain and significant loss, amplifies the echoes of such past decisions, making the present choice feel even more critical. You move to the highest point of the tower, shielding your eyes against the bright glare off the water. The ship is close enough now that you can discern the different colors of its sails, the shape of its rigging, the faint glint of sunlight on metal. Still, their intentions remain a mystery, a blank page written across the sea. You consider the practicality of your current situation. Your food stores are lower than you'd like, and the oil for the lamp requires careful rationing. A new thought surfaces, a practical consideration that stems from your earlier task of reinforcing the lighthouse. You remember the sticky, dark pitch you used to seal the cracks in the stone. It proved effective not only against the sea spray, but also against the small, scurrying creatures that sometimes invaded the lower levels, drawn by the scent of stored provisions. This useful discovery, a direct result of your earlier efforts, now influences how you perceive the potential dangers of interaction. The ship's captain might have legitimate business, but they might also be careless with their waste, or perhaps their presence itself will attract unwanted attention. The constant effort to maintain a secure and orderly environment within the lighthouse, a direct consequence of your earlier focus on its structural integrity, makes you acutely aware of the potential disruptions a ship could bring. This heightened awareness pushes you further towards a more conservative approach. You recall the pages of the keeper's log, filled with notations about supplying the lighthouse. There were mentions of methods for preserving dried fish, a process that involved salting and then allowing them to cure in the wind. This knowledge, gleaned from the quiet hours spent with the old book, offers a different perspective on resourcefulness, suggesting that survival can be as much about careful management as it is about acquisition. With the ship now within a reasonable distance, its silhouette clear against the horizon, you make your decision. The instinct for self-reliance, honed by months of solitude and the stark realities of your environment, guides your hand. The potential benefits of signaling, the food, the companionship, seem outweighed by the undeniable risks of exposure and the disruption to your carefully maintained order. You decide to remain unseen, to let the vessel pass, preserving your sanctuary.
You retreat from the parapet, the image of the ship seared into your mind, its distant presence a potent reminder of the wider world that exists beyond your island. The wind begins to whip more insistently, carrying the sharp tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls. You turn your attention back to the lamp, its steady glow a comforting, familiar presence in the approaching twilight. The rhythm of your duty reasserts itself, a quiet promise against the vastness of the sea. You find yourself changed by the encounter, your resolve to maintain your solitary vigilance strengthened by the careful consideration of risk and reward. The howling wind outside the tower seemed to mock your decision. You had remained unseen, a deliberate choice to let that distant ship sail on. The decision had been made in a moment of deep consideration for your own fragile existence, a careful weighing of risk against the unknown. And now the storm, which had been gathering strength, began to lash the island with a ferocity that felt like a direct consequence. Waves, higher and more violent than you had yet witnessed, slammed against the stone foundations of the lighthouse, sending spray high up the walls, even reaching the lower windows. The solid thud of the impacts vibrated through the very stone beneath your feet, a constant, unnerving tremor that spoke of the sea's unrestrained power. This tempest was unlike the usual squalls you'd weathered. It was a true gale, a wild beast that seemed intent on tearing the very island apart. The windows, though thick glass, rattled violently in their frames, and you found yourself instinctively pressing a hand against them, as if to offer them some meager support. The constant grinding roar of the wind was punctuated by sharp cracks and groans from the tower itself, sounds that spoke of stress and strain. You pulled your woolen cloak tighter, the rough fabric a familiar comfort against your skin, though it did little to ward off the chill that seemed to seep into your bones, a chill born more of apprehension than the mere temperature. The lamp, your precious charge, flickered precariously in its housing, its warm glow a small defiance against the encroaching darkness and the storm's relentless assault. As the wind howled, the memory of the ship lingered. You had watched its sails diminish on the horizon, a faint speck swallowed by the vastness of the ocean. Had they been in trouble? Had they been seeking shelter? You would likely never know. This deliberate act of remaining unseen, a choice made to preserve your meager stores and avoid potential unknown dangers, now weighed on your mind as the storm intensified. Your previous prudence in conserving lamp oil, a decision driven by the stark reality of dwindling supplies, had made the beacon's light less brilliant. Now, in this escalating fury of the elements, you wondered if that fainter light might be insufficient for any vessel unfortunate enough to be caught in this tempest. You moved to the lantern room, your hand automatically reaching for the oil reservoir, checking its level with a practiced touch. The amount remaining was still a concern, a constant gnawing worry that had been with you since the outgoing keeper's departure. The previous conservation efforts, though necessary, meant the light was not as strong as it could be. The storm outside now amplified this concern. A sudden violent gust struck the tower, making the entire structure sway momentarily, and the lamp's flame dipped dangerously low. You instinctively reached out to steady the lamp's mechanism, your fingers brushing against the cool, polished brass,
ensuring its rotation continued its steady, life-saving sweep. The island's meager vegetation bowed and thrashed under the storm's onslaught. The tough, salt-tolerant grasses, usually resilient, whipped back and forth like frantic dancers. The stunted trees, already gnarred by years of wind, groaned under the immense pressure, their branches thrashing with a sound like snapping bones. You could hear the sharp cries of seabirds, usually so dominant, now nearly swallowed by the overwhelming roar of the wind and waves. They sought any shelter they could find, their frantic calls a desperate plea against the storm's fury. The familiar scent of salt and damp earth, usually a grounding presence, was now mingled with the acrid smell of churning sea foam, a scent that spoke of the ocean's raw, untamed power. A sudden shift in the tower's groaning drew your attention. A section of the masonry near the base seemed to be loosening. It was a different part of the structure than the small breach you had noted and prioritized repairing earlier in your tenancy, a testament to the sea's unyielding assault. The thought of venturing out into this chaos to assess it seemed utterly foolhardy. Your focus remained resolutely on the lamp, the symbol of your duty, the reason for your isolation. The storm's intensity meant any lapse in vigilance here could have dire consequences for unseen sailors. This was a stark reminder of how deeply intertwined your personal safety was with the beacon's unwavering operation. Amidst the storm's rage, a memory surfaced, a passage from one of the books you'd discovered in the hidden compartment. It spoke of historical methods for reinforcing stone structures using a mixture of lime, sand, and animal hair, a technique used by ancient builders to create resilient mortars. This piece of knowledge, so seemingly distant from your current plight, offered a small spark of intellectual curiosity. It also highlighted the limitations of your current resources. You had no lime, and the animal hair mentioned was a luxury far beyond your reach. The practical realities of the island's sparse offerings always returned you to the immediate tasks at hand. The sheer effort of keeping the lamp functioning required a constant stream of your physical energy. Each adjustment, each careful trimming of the wick, each check of the oil level demanded a focused calm that was increasingly difficult to maintain. You found yourself breathing more shallowly as the storm pressed in, your movements becoming more deliberate, more cautious. The constant vibration from the impacts of the waves was a physical drain, a subtle but persistent exhaustion. It was a demanding occupation, this tending of the light, and the storm was certainly testing your resolve, pushing you to your very limits of endurance. This demanding vigilance, this constant tending of the lamp against the storm's fury, had become an ingrained part of your existence. The raw power of the ocean outside was a constant presence, a reminder of your isolation. Yet inside the tower, your duty provided a sense of purpose. The struggle to keep the flame steady, to ensure its beam cut through the tempest, had become a deeply personal battle, a quiet testament to your commitment. The knowledge gleaned from those salvaged books offered a different kind of sustenance, a connection to a wider world of ideas that helped to temper the harshness of your solitary life. The resilience of the lighthouse, and indeed of your own spirit, had been tested in this violent storm, forging a new understanding of your place within this harsh, beautiful landscape. The rhythm of the lamp's sweep, a constant beacon against the raging elements, has become part of your own story. The wind howls around the stone tower, a relentless force that rattles the very core of your being. Waves, whipped into a frenzy by the storm, crash against the base, sending spray high up the tower walls. You've chosen to remain unseen during the recent passage of that distant ship,
a decision that now feels heavy with consequence as the tempest intensifies. Inside the comforting glow of the lamp, your unwavering charge seems to waver under the strain of the gale. The very structure groans, a deep, resonant sound that vibrates through the stone floor beneath your worn boots. This is the reality of your vigil, a constant battle against the elements, made more precarious by past choices that now dictate your present struggle.
The air within the tower, usually still and cool, now carries a dampness that seeps into your clothes, clinging to your skin. You feel a chill that has little to do with the temperature, a primal awareness of the storm's power. The lamp, a beacon of hope for those at sea, is your sole focus, yet keeping it steady requires immense effort. A particularly strong gust shakes the tower, and the flame gutters, threatening to be extinguished. This flickering instability, a direct result of not signaling the vessel that passed, forces you to act quickly to ensure the light remains a steadfast guide. You find yourself drawn to the lamp room, the heart of your solitary existence. The large glass lens, usually pristine, is streaked with sea salt and brine, misting over from the violent air currents that find their way even here. The task of cleaning it, a ritual you've honed over months, now feels like a race against time. You reach for the thick, coarse cloth you use, its familiar roughness a small comfort in the chaos. This practical action, this grounding in the tangible, is your anchor against the overwhelming power of the storm raging outside. Part of you urges caution, a desire to retreat to the lower, more sheltered levels of the tower, to conserve your own strength. The thought of your dwindling food stores and the effort needed to simply endure this onslaught gnaws at your resolve. Yet the responsibility for the light, for the unseen sailors who might be navigating these treacherous waters, pulls you with an undeniable force. The memory of the ship that passed, its dark sails fading into the distance without your acknowledgement, stings like the spray that now lashes the tower windows. You must venture out from the relative safety of the lamp chamber, moving towards the outer gallery where the wind's fury is at its peak. Each step on the spiraling stone staircase is a careful calculation, your hand gripping the rough, cold wall for balance. The sounds are overwhelming, the shrieking of the wind, the roar of the waves, and the splintering creak of the tower itself. You pull your worn woolen cloak tighter, the rough fibers scratching against your exposed skin, a meager defense against the biting chill. Reaching the gallery, you brace yourself against the railing, the metal cold and slick beneath your gloved hands. The wind tears at your clothes, and you feel your breath come in ragged gasps. The glass of the lantern is a swirling vortex of spray and darkness, making the task of keeping it clear an immense challenge. You work with a desperate urgency, your movements economical and precise, fueled by the knowledge that any lapse could have dire consequences for those at sea. The mechanism that rotates the lens is also buffeted by the storm, its grinding gears protesting under the strain. You can feel the vibrations through the very stone you stand upon. There is a need to check the oil reservoir, to ensure the flame has enough fuel, but venturing further out into the storm feels like tempting fate. The sheer force of the wind threatens to rip you from your perch, and the thought of your own precarious hold on existence sharpens your focus on the immediate task. The historical accounts you found in the keeper's log spoke of times when the sea claimed entire ships, leaving no trace behind. These tales, once distant narratives, now feel like a grim prophecy whispering on the wind. You remember reading about a technique for securing loose stonework with a mixture of lime and pitch, a method you've begun to use to mend minor breaches. That understanding, that acquired knowledge, now feels insufficient against this overwhelming onslaught.
though the thought of reinforcing the lantern housing provides a brief, practical focus. This storm, however, presents a different challenge than the more localized threats you faced. It is a pervasive force that tests not just your preparedness, but your very will to continue. The isolation you've grown accustomed to now feels like a vulnerability, a lack of support that amplifies the danger. Yet, in this struggle, there is also a strange sense of purpose, a connection to the raw power of nature, and your role as a sentinel against its destructive embrace. The effort to keep the lens clear, to maintain the steady pulse of light, consumes you. It is a physical and mental exertion that leaves you trembling, not from cold, but from the sheer intensity of the fight. You find a brief moment of respite by ducking into the small alcove within the gallery, the stone providing a slight buffer from the direct blast. It is here, catching your breath, that you contemplate the deep responsibility of your position, the profound impact of your solitary vigil. You have touched something larger than yourself in this churning elemental fury. As the last sliver of daylight surrenders to the vast Atlantic, the lamp's steady beam begins its nightly vigil. Imagine the solitude of this isolated rock, the salty spray a constant companion to the solitary keeper in 1638. Life here is a rhythm of the tides, of checking the lamp's oil, of mending rough-spun clothes against the biting wind. Supplies are a precious commodity, arriving with the infrequent merchant vessel, a welcome sight on the horizon, a brief whisper of the world beyond.
Yet, even amidst the harshness, there are moments of profound peace. The creak of the lamp mechanism, a familiar lullaby. The vast, star-dusted sky, an ocean mirroring the one below. The distant sails, a fleeting connection to other lives, a brief nod across the waves. Tonight, as the ocean murmurs its ancient secrets, let that same peaceful rhythm carry you into slumber. Feel the gentle sway, the steady light, and drift into dreams as serene as the quiet sea. Sleep soundly, dear friends.